Airbnb, the mafia, a serial killer? This seems like an impossible combination of causes for a fire, but it's precisely what came together on March 16, 2023. In the heart of Old Montreal, a serene evening takes a horrifying turn. Flames rage, emergency sirens wail, and desperate cries for help fill the air. By the next day, 7 people are dead, and questions come up about what really happened that night. Place Duville is in the historic heart of Old Montreal. It holds a cherished place in the neighborhood's story. Its cobbled pathways and charm offer a glimpse into the area's rich past. Centuries-old buildings there stand as silent witnesses to time. Here, both locals and visitors gather. They come to absorb the cultural and architectural heritage that defines Old Montreal. An Airbnb guest relaxes in a centuries-old building, enjoying the quiet. Suddenly, shouting in the hallway grabs his attention. He stands up and heads to the door. There, he finds flames and smoke. Panic sets in. He dashes around his apartment, his heart racing. He doesn't understand what's happening outside. All he knows is he must leave quickly. Like many buildings in this historic district, there are no windows, so he can't see anything. Trapped, he smells the fire and hears the rescue teams, but cannot find a way to safety. The flames threaten the ancient wooden beams that have supported the building for centuries. Sirens and the wails of emergency vehicles fill the air as firefighters and paramedics soon arrive. The situation is dire, and they must act fast. The William Watson Ogilvie building was constructed in 1890, initially housing offices for a flour company. Then, by the 1980s, it was turned into residential units. Records show that in 2009, Emile Benamor, a lawyer with a checkered history, bought the building. His acquisition came amid whispers of murky dealings and would later draw intense scrutiny. There were 15 units, 12 of which were permanently rented as Airbnbs, despite such rentals being illegal in Old Montreal. This would prove crucial in the unfolding rescue operations. Brave firefighters and rescue teams wasted no time. They knew that every second counted. Helicopters roared overhead, casting beams of light into the thick, choking smoke. It was a race against time as they fought to control the flames, save lives, and evacuate those trapped within.
When firefighters first arrived, there were flames coming out the windows. There were several people trapped in windows on the roof. So there were at least 4 people rescued with ground ladders, other people rescued by aerial ladders. One person that we know right now is missing that we can't get a hold of. But we don't know how many other people may be missing because several apartments were also Airbnb rentals.
But it wasn't one missing person. 6 Airbnb guests were unaccounted for. They included 18-year-old Charlie LaCroix, who had called 911 twice, begging for help. The next day, authorities officially announced that it was possible that more people had been inside the building.
Firefighters say some of the units were devoted to Airbnb, making it difficult to know exactly how many people were inside at the time. One resident who did not want to appear on camera said of the 15 rental units, 12 were devoted to short-term rentals.
Despite the families publicly saying their loved ones were staying in the Airbnbs, officials didn't confirm it until days later. To aid in the rescue, the response team used infrared drones to locate bodies. Given the state of the building, hopes of finding anyone alive were dashed. The building was already vulnerable before the fire, and damage further complicated the operation. Finally, on March 18th, the number of missing people was adjusted. The 6 missing Airbnb guests acknowledged. The building's age and structure made it difficult for responders to enter. So for the families and friends of the missing people, it was a long and painful waiting game. They set up a makeshift vigil outside the area, where they would gather every day. 2 days later, the first victim's body was extracted.
There's no way I can tell you when. We cannot guarantee it will even be possible. We are dedicated to finding all the persons who are missing, but you've seen the situation, you've seen the rubble. It will be hard.
The risk of collapse was still too high, so cranes and drones were deployed to dismantle the heritage building brick by brick, floor by floor, and locate the victims. One of the survivors came forward to tell her story.
We started seeing the orange flames and the orange light from underneath the door and the sound of crackling fire. My husband grabbed a boot and smashed the window, and we got out through that.
At this point, nobody knew that the reason for the fire was far more sinister than anyone could have expected. Airbnb mostly declined to comment on the tragedy, only saying it would remove all the unregistered rentals in Quebec. The Montreal tourism minister, Caroline Proulx, met with the platform and warned it of her plans to amend the law.
They have to comply. We'll make sure that they understand the message.
Some parliamentary members said it's difficult to monitor illegal Airbnbs because they are not registered. But a previous tourism minister said if customers could find them, authorities could as well. Over the next week, the police and fire department held daily briefings.
The complexity of the access in the building obliged us to remove each pieces of the structure with the help of the basket and the crane. These actions allowed us to contribute to the discovery of the second victim. We will concentrate our research for victims in other sections of the building that is targeted by the SPVM investigator.
11 days after the fire, all the victims' bodies had been recovered. Meanwhile, those working for the building's owners were already advertising units for short-term rental online.
7 people who were missing at the beginning of the investigation have all been found, pulled out of the rubble, and identified.
The recovery ended on March 29th, but for the families of the 7 victims, it was only the start of a long, sinister journey. Naturally, questions and blame emerged. It was a nightmare of tragedy and controversy that is still going on to this day. It's important to note that Montreal outlawed Airbnb-style rentals in historic areas back in 2018. This was done to preserve the district's local character and encourage diverse residential use. So, how were there a dozen listings in the building? Property owner Emile Benamor blamed the Airbnb operation on a tenant, claiming that he did not know about it. But reporting has suggested that the landlord was aware and willing to look the other way in exchange for a cut of the profits. Subletting the apartments to travelers was a lucrative business, so the short-term rental hosts did not mind paying higher rent. This way, Benamor could circumvent rent control laws and hike prices. The original tenants claimed that in order to transform the building, they were pushed out using harassment tactics like unannounced visits early in the morning, cutting off the electricity, and even direct bullying. Benamor owned 4 properties, with over 20 apartments on Airbnb. With the spotlight on the landlord, his shady past, legal troubles, professional misconduct, and ties to organized crime came into focus. Benamor was a lawyer whose clients included members of the Rizzuto organization, which is part of the Montreal Mafia. Benamor's name appeared multiple times in court documents after a major police operation. Additionally, he has been involved in other controversial legal practices, including a case where he pressured teenagers to plead guilty to armed robbery, leading to an overturned conviction. And it didn't stop there. In 2021, Benamor admitted to tax evasion for failing to report almost $470,000 in income. There was widespread speculation that the 21 drafts deposited into a personal bank account were connected to his ownership of approximately 20 Airbnbs. To many, it seemed as though Benamor would do anything for a profit, even if it was in exchange for human lives. According to those who spoke out after the disaster, he was ruthless all around. Airbnb was made aware of the building's state a year before the disaster, when a woman staying in the Old Montreal building contacted them. She raised concerns about the safety of the unit and possible illegal Airbnb rentals.
We get into the room, it immediately reeked of cigarettes. Really, really bad, and so my first thing was let me open a window, because they were openable windows. But they were all glued shut.
What did Airbnb do in this situation? They replied with an email saying, "All your concerns are noted and reported. No legal action was taken." After the fire, the same guests contacted Airbnb again with outrage, saying, quote, "This is the same building I made complaints about and urged you to investigate as an unsafe Airbnb." She was met with an automated response that read, quote, "Really sorry for your bad experience through our platform." Former tenant Joseph Brockman also had a terrible experience.
This is a freaking fire trap. It's kind of small, a little bit, kind of a little sketchy, but in a kind of a cute way. And then it was like, holy, there's no windows.
A video began circulating on social media, showing no window in the unit. It would seem that the platform was made aware of this at least twice within the year leading up to the fire. Airbnb removed listings without a permit soon after the fire, but it was too late for the families who had lost loved ones. But why didn't Airbnb act sooner? It also came to light that there was even more wrong with the building. Although it looked well kept outside, inside, it was unsafe. There were multiple fire codes broken between 2009 and 2018. Some residents reported missing smoke detectors and exit signs.
The thing that we have repeated the most, probably, in the last few days anyway, was that a simple battery in a fire alarm, and he would be here.
Fire alarms were too quiet and not up to code. Structural issues blocked emergency exits. And of course, there were the apartments with no windows. Before the tragedy, the fire department noted problems with escape routes caused by a renovation that ignored tenant safety. It is unknown whether this was followed up on after that. The community questioned why the fire department had stopped inspections, but the fire chief refuted the claims.
When we are really sure that there's an infraction that puts safety in jeopardy, we take immediate action and force compliance, or in extreme cases, force supplemental measures to be put in place.
Additionally, Benamor claims the firefighters didn't have enough resources to fight the fire. They also allegedly ignored his warnings about people stuck in Airbnb rentals. Since the listings were not permitted, the responders could not have known there were short-term rentals in the building. While the investigation into the cause of the fire was ongoing, there was a twist to the story.
Accidental cause has now been ruled out. We are now talking about a criminal investigation, and I can confirm that traces of accelerant were found, which may help explain the speed at which the blaze spread.
Surveillance footage held the answers to how the fire started. The explosion happens. Flames start gushing out of the building, and then a man can be seen leaving the scene. The suspected arsonist was identified as Denis Bégin, a 63-year-old convicted murderer on the run. After escaping from a minimum security institution in Quebec, he had been on several most wanted lists. Bégin was nicknamed the Halloween Killer after he fatally shot a teenager at a Halloween party while wearing a goalie mask. The 63-year-old was diagnosed as a psychopath with a lengthy criminal record, including arson and fraud. Psychiatrists highlighted his narcissistic and antisocial traits. They also warn of a high risk of violent reoffending. He is now the primary suspect in the case. Bégin was caught in May 2023, but despite being linked to the crime weeks prior, he has still not been charged. More than a year after the fire, victims' families are frustrated with the lengthy process.
I mean, how can that happen? It's not only tragedy of human failure, but it's a comedy of errors. All these emotions give us no warning. They just happen at a moment's notice, and they can occur continuously to one another. We can feel grief, and then a moment later, anger.
After the incident, victims' families quickly filed lawsuits, set in motion by the relatives of Nathan Sears. They sought $22 million in damages. Their target, the building owner, city, and Airbnb.
Thoughts of him and just the feeling of him being around have been constant. I actually feel like he hasn't even left me in my sleep. He is with me every moment right now. So it actually wasn't until the next morning that she finally called my parents to tell them that she hadn't heard from Nathan and that he was missing. My mother immediately went to the internet and started searching frantically for what could have happened in Montreal, an accident, a shooting, stabbing, like what? And when she stumbled upon the news of the fire and she saw that it was an old building that had housed Airbnbs, she just knew.
The building owner countered with a $7.6 million lawsuit against the city. Benamor claimed that strict heritage rules stopped needed safety upgrades. Most notably, the 100-year-old door could not be changed, which caused a fire hazard and a safety issue since it had to stay unlocked. But his claims appear less believable, knowing that he had already been ordered to court for failing to act on safety issues. On top of that, Benamor filed a second lawsuit against city officials, including the mayor, this time for defamation. His lawyer said the building owner faced public trial and reputation damage. For survivor Benjamin Majid, the day of the fire constantly plagues him.
Probably the most lasting scar I think I have from that day is the survivor's guilt. This feels like such a juxtaposition of the immediate help that we received that morning versus what feels like glacial pace of the investigation.
The victims' families are still waiting for justice. The city of Montreal now requires Airbnb listings to display their registration number. However, residents are still at loggerheads with the city and the platform. On March 7, 2024, a new building was spray painted, and angry protesters filled the streets.
Building still managed to get Airbnbs for short-term lease in a new construction. What we want is the borough to be more politically involved in this and not just say like what we did is okay on paper. We want them to realize that this is contributing to the housing crisis right now.
The overall feeling is that the city, Airbnb, and the building owner did too little, too late, and the 7 victims' families are left holding the devastation. Watch this episode next if you found this video interesting. Please add a like and leave a comment if you want to support the channel.